Today we're going to be talking all about cedarwood notes in perfumery, and that cedarwood being a subcategory of woody raw materials. So you've got a lot of other woody raw materials, things like sandalwood, agarwood, and then other things which are often classed as woods, so they're not really woods, like patchouli and vetiver. And you've got all of these different woody raw materials, but one of my favorite categories is cedarwood and similar smells. So in this video, I'm going to go through the different cedarwood notes, or at least the key ones. So that's cedarwood essential oil and some synthetic cedarwood notes, and talk about what they smell like, and maybe also look a little bit at how you can actually go and use these things to make your own perfumes. So if you're interested in that, then definitely stick around to the end of the video. This video is sponsored by Luxetera, my online store where you can find all of the essential equipment for perfumery. Only good quality and good value for money products make the cut, and I use almost all of the products myself when making perfumes for my brand. To browse the full range of products, visit www.lux-terra.co.uk or click the link in the description. So then, cedarwood, what actually is it? Well, it's a bit of a funny one because true cedar, or the Cedrus botanical family, there are some plants in this family, actual real cedars, and some of those are used in perfumery, but we're not going to talk about those in this video because there is something else called fake cedar, which is actually a lot more popular in perfumery, and these are the usual cedars that people are referring to when they say they're using cedarwood in their perfumes. So these cedars, Cedarwood Virginian and Cedarwood Texan, are the two main ones used in perfumery. And these are actually junipers, which are technically part of the cypress family of raw materials. But basically they're trees and they have this distinctive cedar smell. So Cedarwood Virginian is probably the most famous one and is actually commonly used to make things like furniture and pencils. So unsurprisingly, the smell of Virginian cedarwood essential oil is pretty much the same as when you sharpen a pencil. So if you don't have Virginian cedarwood, that's basically what it smells like. Now I personally really love this smell, this kind of fresh, slightly dry, woody smell, and it's really a kind of nice, like lumber kind of woody smell. It's not like a sandalwood, which is really creamy, or it's not like a really smoky kind of wood. It's just a kind of pure, crisp kind of wood almost that smells a little bit fresh from a tree. It just smells really rich and, let's just say, woody. Anyway, I've got some of the Virginian cedarwood here. And when you smell this essential oil, so initially, straight away, the kind of impact or the smell that you get to begin with, it's this kind of fresh, woody kind of pencil shaving smell, and it smells very natural. It smells quite, I wouldn't say it's sharp, but it's got this kind of sharpness, or this kind of, it's quite loud, you know. And then as it dries down on the scent strip, it kind of loses some of that edge to it, and it just becomes this very woody, this recognizable woody smell. I really think out of all the woods used in perfumery, when I think of what is a woody smell, or what does wood smell like, cedarwood essential oil really does one of the best jobs at that for me. So we've got this Virginian cedarwood, and then alongside that we've also got something called Texan cedarwood, which I hadn't heard of at the same time I'd heard of Virginian cedarwood. I came across it, I thought it was a bit more unusual, but after doing some research I actually found that this is now the most widely used cedarwood in the perfume industry, and actually about 5 times more of it is produced per year and used in perfumes than the Virginian cedarwood essential oil. So this Texan cedarwood, it's meant to smell a little bit more smoky, and the Texan cedarwood is meant to actually get sweeter over time on the scent strip, so it's meant to dry down to a sweeter smell, whereas the Virginian cedarwood is meant to dry down from a sweeter smell to more of a dry woody smell. But to me, the real difference between the Texan and the Virginian cedarwood is that I find, at least with my 2 samples, the Texan cedarwood is just a little bit greener to begin with, and then when it dries down, so after a bit of time, I do think a bit more of a smokiness comes through, and this is just a very slight smokiness. The 2 smells are in fact really quite similar. So that's the naturals, i.e. cedarwood essential oil, but there are also some synthetic cedar, let's say aromachemicals, that are also pretty widely used in perfumery. Now I've got 3 of them here, and those are Vertofix, Cedramber, and Cedryl acetate. There are a few other ones like Cedrol, for example, and all of these are pretty much actually made from the cedarwood oil. So it's not like these things are completely made up like magic in a lab by scientists just out of kind of petrochemicals. They're pretty much made by taking the cedarwood oil, taking some parts of that, and then doing things to it. So for example, in Vertofix, what it really is they've taken what's called the terpene fraction, i.e. that's just, let's say, half of the stuff in cedarwood essential oil, and then they've gone and done what's called an acetylation. They've acetylated it. So they've just done some kind of basic chemical reaction with it, and that's produced this thing called Vertofix. There's actually a very similar thing that's been done with vetiver, another woody note, and there's this raw material you can get called vetiveryl acetate, and that's pretty much the same thing done to vetiver essential oil. So this Vertofix then, what does that actually smell like? Well, this is something when you put it on the scent strip straight away, I actually find it gets lost because it's quite subtle. But after you've left it for like an hour or so, like I have here, you basically get this kind of, I don't know, it's just a woody kind of cedar smell. The main difference between Vertofix and the cedarwood essential oil is that the Vertofix is much more of a kind of clean single smell, but it's a lot more subtle. It doesn't have that same impact. When you smell the cedarwood essential oil, you really get all this kind of fresh, woody stuff coming right at you. Whereas Vertofix just smells like a kind of a woody tone. It's almost like kind of maybe a very clarified, kind of clear version of, you know, almost like a clean, like a non-rough, a non-rustic version of the kind of woody note. So that's Vertofix. What about the cedryl acetate? So for me, cedryl acetate reminds me a little bit of kind of wood varnish, that kind of smell. I think it's a little bit sweeter than something like Vertofix. And I also think it's a little bit stronger, at least straight away when you put it on the scent strip. So it seems to me just a little bit more kind of pungent. It's a bit more noticeable. And this does remind me maybe a little bit more of the fresher side of the wood. I'm imagining this is kind of the smell if I got like a new wooden decking and then I was like painting it with varnish or something. It just feels like that kind of smell. And then finally we've also got the cedramber. Now the cedramber is not just, let's say, a cedarwood smell, but it really is also now kind of like a woody amber smell as well, and I guess that's why I got the name. So the cedramber is quite interesting because it doesn't smell like you've got so much of that kind of glossy, woody, clean, like varnishy cedar, like the other ones had to some degree. But this one smells much closer to an actual woody amber. So if you smell something like Amber Extreme, and the way I describe this as say like a really kind of dry, more of like a rasping kind of strong, dusty, woody smell. So it's less of like a kind of sweet woody smell. It's more of a dusty, dry, harsher woody smell. These three synthetics are probably the most common of these kind of cedarwood synthetics in this category. In fact, in the book Perfumery Practice and Principles, where it has a beginner's perfumery palette and arranges some of these raw materials into categories, these three synthetics, so Vertofix, cedramber, and cedryl acetate, are basically the only three listed for this cedar category. And they're listed alongside cedarwood Virginian to learn. So it's basically saying, if you're a beginner perfumer, in this whole category, these cedar woody notes, basically these are the four important ones. Now also, if we look at Jean-Claude Alaina's perfume, The Alchemy of Scent, where he gives his perfumery palette, the only ones listed in there are actually cedarwood Virginian and Vertofix. So clearly these two, again, are quite important, or at least he decides that these are important enough for him to bother using in his perfumes. So if you're learning perfumery for yourself, then I would recommend getting these 5 raw materials, or at least some of them, because this really introduces you to this whole kind of cedarwood category of raw materials. There are some other things like cedrol that you can also look into if you want to, but I'd really say that these are the basics. Now, of course, you can go and blend these all together and make a cedarwood accord. If you put more stuff like the vertofix and the cedral acetate, you're going to get a sweeter, cleaner accord. If you put in more of the actual cedarwood essential oil, you're going to get something a lot more kind of impactful, rustic, that kind of raw, woody, powerful smell. And if you put in more of the cedramber, you're going to be leaning towards more of that dusty, like dry, woody, kind of ambery smell that's going to blend well with your other woody ambers. What can you expect in terms of longevity? Well, I found all of these notes to basically be mid notes, and I would say they're maybe a little bit more leaning to the top note side. So they're mid notes, they will last a reasonable amount of time, but they're not going to last for ages. They're not going to last as long as your musks or your vanillas, things like that. And I would say they probably last towards the shorter side of things. So probably about 3 days on the scent strip you could expect for these things, maybe like an hour or so on the skin. Now, when I was researching this video, I was also looking at another one of the books, and this one is Introduction to Perfumery. And this one actually said on its page for Cedarwood Virginian, so the essential oil, that one experiment you can try with it is to mix it with methylenone gamma or alpha isomethylionone. So I've gone and got that here, and I've got both of them on 2 separate scent strips, and I'm going to hold them together. And yeah, these two do smell pretty nice together. So if you don't know, the methylenone gamma has this kind of violety smell. It's this kind of very soft, inviting violet smell, whereas the cedarwood is obviously this kind of this woody cedarwood smell. And together they work really nicely as a combination. And I think part of the reason for this may be that cedarwood has something called fujopsine inside of it. And if you look at the chemical structure of this fujopsine, it actually looks quite similar to Isoi Super, which is this really famous woody amber kind of smell. And if you look at the structure of the ionones, again, they are very similar to this Isoi Super structure. So it's possible that there is this kind of natural accord or natural harmony between violet and cedarwood. Since I discovered that relationship between those structures, I always thought of them as kind of analogous smells in perfumery. So it's similar to in color theory, where an analogous color scheme would be something like red, orange, and yellow, and that's because they're all next to each other in the color wheel. Well, in this case, you've kind of got something similar, because cedar molecules similar to woody amber, similar to ionone molecules in terms of structure, and probably how the nose goes and perceives them is some kind of continuum of this going to this going to that. So I find violet and cedar to be analogous smells. So that's just a little tip if anyone's looking to compose stuff with these perfumes. I think cedarwood and violet, pretty good combination. If you are interested in learning more about cedar in perfumery, I would highly recommend an article by someone called Matvey Yudov on Fragrantica called Cedar in Perfumery, Roots and Stumps. I'll put a link to it in the description of this video. That's where I got some of the information from this video, and I didn't go into it, but this article also covers a lot more information on the real cedar, so not the fake cedar woods like most people use in perfumery, but the actual real cedars, so other things like cedarwood atlas or Himalayan cedar, that kind of thing. So if you're interested in all of that, then definitely go and check out that article. It also talks a little bit about the levels that some of these things like vertofix or cedarwood essential oil are actually used at in real perfume. So if you're looking to get an idea for how you might dose these kind of things, I think he's really talking about the perfumes which go and overdose them. So if you're getting an idea of, say, like the maximum level of cedarwood you would use for a really cedarwood kind of perfume, then go check out that article and it will tell you that information. So that's it from me on this topic. I hope you enjoyed the video, hope you learned something. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.